Scorpio, thank you for being here with me today. There's something very different about the energy in this space right now. Quieter, deeper, but also incredibly powerful in a way that's hard to fully explain. And strangely enough, that's the exact same feeling I've been picking up from you lately. Something is shifting inside of Scorpio, not loudly, not in the kind of way everyone around you would immediately notice. But you can feel it, almost like an older part of yourself is slowly realizing it no longer belongs where it used to. As we move through these final days of the month and begin drifting closer to a new one, I keep feeling Scorpio standing in the middle of a very deep emotional and spiritual transition. Your intuition feels different. Your inner world feels different. Even your energy carries a different weight to it now. And tonight, I just want to gently open this space with you for a little while and see what spirit may be trying to help Scorpio here at this moment in your life. Scorpio, I honestly feel like it's been a long time since you truly allowed yourself to fully rest. And I don't just mean sleeping more or putting your phone down for a while. I'm talking about the kind of rest where your nervous system finally lets go. After spending far too long holding itself together through everything, it feels like you've gotten so used to being strong that somewhere along the way, you forgot what it feels like to soften. And the thing that stands out to me the most right now is that the energy around Scorpio no longer feels like it's trying to hold everything in place the way it used to. There's an older emotional layer beginning to crack open. It feels like those moments late at night. When you're sitting alone after a long day, the room is quiet, the fan humming softly, light coming through the window. Your phone buzzes a couple times and then goes silent again, and suddenly you realize you've been tired for much longer than you admitted to yourself. Not just physically tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying too much internally without ever really letting anyone see it. The Ten of Wands card comes through here very strongly, but it doesn't feel dramatic in the way people often expect. It feels more like someone who has carried too much weight for too long, to the point where the body itself begins to understand it can't keep living the same way anymore. And Scorpio, I think part of you already knew this. You've been sensing that some kind of shift was getting closer for a while now. It just didn't arrive in the form you imagined it would. The Death card sits right at the center of this energy. And I want to speak very gently about this card because people misunderstand it all the time. This doesn't feel like frightening loss. It feels more like an older version of yourself slowly realizing it no longer fits the soul you've become. Old reactions, old forms of silence. Those nights of carrying everything alone without letting anyone truly see you. Something inside of Scorpio no longer wants to survive that way forever. And some transformation doesn't arrive like some massive explosion. Sometimes it begins the moment you no longer have the energy to pretend you're okay. I also feel Scorpio becoming much more sensitive to energy lately. You walk into a room and immediately feel the atmosphere of it. You hear someone's voice and somehow sense what they're hiding underneath ordinary words. And there may even be nights where your body feels exhausted, but your mind still refuses to fully shut off. Like your body wants rest, but your soul is still standing guard over something. And that's where the Star card begins to appear very softly in this reading. Quietly, not dramatic. It feels like a small light inside a dark room. When you finally begin understanding that healing doesn't always come from forcing yourself to become stronger. Sometimes healing begins the moment you stop fighting the truth that you're tired. And honestly, I don't think Scorpio is becoming weaker right now. If anything, I think you're moving toward a different kind of strength. Less guarded, less survival mode, but far more real. And maybe for the first time in a very long while, Spirit is no longer asking Scorpio to keep enduring more and more. It just wants you to slow down long enough to finally hear the part of yourself that's been trying to speak for a very long time. And I think that's exactly why Scorpio has been feeling a little different from yourself lately. Not in a bad way. It's just that some of your old reactions don't hit as intensely as they used to anymore. Things that once would kept you overthinking for hours now only hold your attention for a few quiet minutes before you let them pass. Almost like part of you has already started walking out of that old room, even if your mind hasn't fully caught up to it yet. The Fool card appears very softly in this energy, almost too softly to notice if you're still looking at life through the eyes of your old self. And honestly, it doesn't feel reckless at all. It feels more like standing in front of a new door, very late at night, your hand already resting on the handle, but pausing there for a few extra seconds just to feel whether you're truly ready to walk through it. And Scorpio, I think you stepped into this new chapter earlier than you realize. Maybe it's only showing up through very small changes right now. The way you've started protecting your peace more carefully. The way you no longer feel the need to explain yourself to everyone around you. Or the way certain energies suddenly leave you feeling drained when they never used to before. Those things may seem small on the surface, but honestly, that's often how transformation begins. Not through one giant cinematic moment, but through the soul slowly refusing to keep accepting what once exhausted it. I also feel Scorpio's intuition becoming much stronger lately. You may not even fully have words for it yet, but there have probably been moments where you sensed something before it happened, or walked into a space and immediately knew the energy there felt off. The Page of Cups card makes me think deeply about that feeling. It's like your emotions and your intuition are finally beginning to speak to each other more clearly. And the interesting thing is, the more you try to ignore it, the louder that inner voice seems to become. And honestly, I don't think Spirit is asking Scorpio to have all the answers right now. This feels softer than that, more like a quiet awakening. Like you're slowly learning how to trust your own feelings again, after spending far too long living in survival mode. And there's something very beautiful appearing in this energy too. The Ace of Cups card. This card doesn't feel emotionally overwhelming or chaotic, it feels peaceful. Like opening a window early in the morning after the room has been closed for days, and realizing for the first time how badly you needed fresh air. I think Scorpio is beginning to create space within yourself for something different. Not because you're forcing yourself to change, but because the older version of you has simply grown too tired to keep living inside the same emotional cycles. And sometimes healing doesn't arrive as becoming someone new. Sometimes it's simply the moment you finally allow yourself to return closer to who you really are. And somehow, that's what quietly begins changing everything. It's just that. Even though Scorpio's energy has been shifting so deeply lately, I don't think your mind has fully caught up to it yet. There's still something that keeps returning during the quietest moments. Maybe it's when you finally lay down after a long day, but your mind still refuses to rest. Or those very late hours of the night, when everything around you has gone silent, but somehow the noise inside of you gets even louder. The Nine of Swords card comes through here as a very quiet kind of exhaustion. Not the kind of pain everyone else can immediately see. It feels more like a mind that has stayed in survival mode for far too long. To the point where even when nothing is wrong, the nervous system still doesn't fully believe it's safe enough to relax. And honestly, I think Scorpio understands this feeling very well. That constant sense of needing to prepare yourself for something. Always keeping part of your energy on guard. Even during moments that were supposed to feel peaceful. I also keep feeling there's a situation Scorpio has replayed in your mind over and over again, but still hasn't fully found closure with internally. It could be connected to money, an old decision, a relationship that never fully settled emotionally. Or maybe it's simply a fear about the future that you haven't quite found the words for yet. The Moon card wraps around all of this energy in a very deep way. It makes me think of those nights driving alone very late, the roads almost completely empty, while your mind fills itself with conversations that never actually happened. Scorpio tends to hold things inside for a very long time. You think deeply, you feel deeply, but you don't always speak those feelings out loud. And sometimes, that's exactly what turns the mind into a room where the lights never fully shut off. The Eight of Swords card carries this feeling very strongly, not because Scorpio is weak, but because you've spent so much time trying to process everything alone. Some people immediately reach out and talk when they're overwhelmed, but Scorpio often chooses silence first. You observe, you hold things in. You try to understand everything internally before letting anyone else see it. It's just that lately, this energy feels much heavier on you than it used to. And the interesting thing is, I don't feel Spirit trying to force Scorpio to suddenly fix everything overnight. This feels softer than that, more like a gentle reminder that maybe you don't have to carry every unanswered question by yourself anymore. Maybe not every night needs a perfect answer before you can rest. Maybe not every emotion has to be solved immediately. Sometimes healing begins the moment you stop fighting your own mind quite so hard. And Scorpio, I honestly think part of you is already beginning to learn how to do that. Very slowly, very gently, because there's another kind of energy slowly rising underneath all of this exhaustion now. And it isn't loud. It's not dramatic in the way people imagine when they think of life changing overnight. But it's powerful enough that Scorpio has started feeling like you're no longer the same person you were a few months ago. And honestly, I notice this most in very ordinary moments, the way you respond to silence now, the way you study people more carefully before trusting them, or the feeling that your intuition has started speaking louder even in the smallest situations. The High Priestess card appears in this energy like a door opening very slowly, not to push Scorpio toward more noise outside of yourself, but to help you finally hear more clearly what some deeper part of you has already known for a long time. And the interesting thing is, the more you try to return to your old version of yourself, the more uncomfortable it begins to feel. You may have already noticed this. Places that once felt familiar now leave you emotionally drained. Conversations that used to feel effortless now make you want to pull your energy inward and become quiet again. Not because you're becoming cold. I honestly think your energy is simply changing. The Judgment card carries this feeling very strongly. It reminds me of waking up very early in the morning before anyone else is awake. Everything completely silent, but somehow knowing deep down that something inside of you has shifted. Not in the sense of I'm fully healed now, and not because life suddenly became perfect. It feels more like a deeper awareness. Almost like Scorpio is finally beginning to see old emotional patterns much more clearly than before. And sometimes that can feel overwhelming, because when awareness grows, it also becomes harder to pretend you don't see the things that once hurt you. I also feel Scorpio's dreams becoming very intense lately, not necessarily frightening, just incredibly vivid. The kind of dreams that stay with you long after you wake up. The kind of energy that doesn't always make logical sense, but still feels emotionally real somehow. And honestly, I don't think Spirit wants Scorpio to fear that. The High Priestess card doesn't feel like losing control. It feels more like intuition expanding. Because sometimes spiritual shifts don't arrive like some giant light falling from the sky. Sometimes it's simply the moment you begin trusting your own inner, knowing more than the noise around you. But I also have to be honest here. This kind of transformation often comes with moments of very deep internal shaking. And the Tower card appearing here doesn't feel like disaster to me. It feels more like an old structure inside of Scorpio beginning to crack open. Because your soul no longer fits inside the smaller version of yourself that once kept you safe. And that can feel both frightening and strangely freeing at the same time. Like a door that stayed locked for far too long finally opening, only to reveal that the light behind it is much stronger than you expected. And honestly, I don't think Scorpio is losing yourself right now. If anything, this feels much closer to you slowly, deeply, returning to the truest part of who you've always been. And I think that's why Scorpio has been feeling such a clear distance lately between peace and fear, not fear in some huge dramatic sense. More like the smaller fears that have lived inside of you for so long. They eventually started looking like survival instincts. The fear of starting over, the fear of not feeling safe enough to finally relax. Or that constant feeling that you always need to prepare yourself in case everything changes again. Scorpio has lived in survival mode far longer than most people realize. And when someone stays in that state for too long, they sometimes forget that life is meant to be more than simply enduring it. The energy right now feels like it's slowly pulling Scorpio out of that place of merely surviving, and asking you to think more honestly about what it would actually feel like to live. The Empress card comes through here so beautifully, and it doesn't carry the energy of rushing to prove your worth to the world. It feels peaceful, like a quiet home with soft golden light late in the evening. A place where you can finally sit down without feeling like you need to protect yourself every second. And honestly, the strongest thing I'm noticing here is that Scorpio is beginning to understand something very important. Abundance doesn't always arrive through pushing yourself harder. Sometimes, abundance begins the moment you stop placing yourself in spaces that constantly make your soul shrink inward. And I think Scorpio has started realizing lately that you no longer want to chase life the same way you once did. You don't want to keep proving yourself endlessly. You don't want to stay inside conversations that drain your energy long after they end. And you don't want to hold on to connections simply because you're afraid of losing something. And honestly, that doesn't make you cold. I think it simply means Scorpio is beginning to understand your self-worth in a much more mature way now. The Ten of Cups card carries a very different feeling from what most people imagine happiness is supposed to look like. It doesn't feel perfect. It feels more like standing in the kitchen very late at night, pouring yourself a glass of water, the house completely quiet, and realizing for the first time in a very long while that your body no longer feels like it has to fight the entire world just to exist. A very small kind of peace, but a real one. And sometimes it's those moments that make Scorpio realize what kind of life you actually want to rebuild for yourself now. Not just to survive, not just to make it through another difficult season, but so your soul can finally have room to breathe again. And the Sun card appears very softly behind all of this energy too. Not harsh, not overwhelming. It feels more like the first light of morning after a long, sleepless night. when nothing is completely clear yet, but you know you're no longer standing in the deepest part of the darkness anymore. And honestly, I think that's where Spirit is gently trying to guide Scorpio back toward right now. Not the version of you that always needs control. Not the version of you that constantly lives in defense mode. But the version of you that's finally beginning to believe peace deserves a place in your life too. And maybe as Scorpio's energy begins softening in that way, you're also starting to realize something else. That you've been lonely for much longer than you thought. Not necessarily in the sense of having nobody around you. I think Scorpio has probably always had people nearby in some way. But there's a very deep difference between people being present and truly feeling seen. Scorpio is often the one who listens more than speaks. The one holding space for everyone else, far more than allowing others to hold space for you. And after a while, that can quietly create the feeling that you always have to process everything alone first. But lately, this energy feels like something very subtle is beginning to shift around connection. Not through huge dramatic relationships, more through small moments that remind Scorpio what it feels like to exist beside someone without being completely guarded all the time. The Two of Cups card comes through here very softly, and it doesn't feel obsessive or emotionally chaotic. It feels more like sitting beside someone, and for the first time in a very long while, your nervous system no longer feels the need to analyze every word before relaxing. A very gentle kind of safety. And honestly, I think Scorpio is beginning to realize you've needed that more than you ever admitted to yourself. Not rescued, not for someone else to complete you, but because after spending so many years carrying everything internally, your soul is finally beginning to remember what it feels like to share energy with another person without constantly bracing yourself. I also feel new connections slowly appearing around Scorpio very naturally right now. Maybe friendship, maybe conversations that somehow make it easier to breathe. Or simply people whose presence no longer makes your energy feel smaller. The Three of Cups card makes me think of soft laughter in a quiet kitchen late at night, or sitting with a few people and realizing you're no longer wearing so many emotional layers just to protect yourself. Scorpio doesn't open up quickly. You observe people for a long time before deciding whether you trust them. And honestly, sometimes you don't even realize how isolated you've become until someone's presence makes your body finally relax a little. The Queen of Cups card appears here like a very gentle reminder about emotional openness. Not in the sense of telling everyone your deepest wounds. More like learning not to shut the door to your heart the moment you begin feeling vulnerable. And honestly, I don't think Spirit is trying to force Scorpio into becoming overly social or emotionally available to everyone around you. This feels much softer than that. Like something is very slowly, very gently, guiding you back toward the feeling that you no longer have to fight through everything alone anymore. And maybe the most healing thing for Scorpio right now isn't someone arriving and completely changing your life. Maybe it's simply the fact that you're finally allowing another person's presence to reach the part of your heart you've protected for far too long. And maybe that's also the moment Scorpio begins realizing the older version of yourself can't continue walking beside this new energy anymore. Not because you hate who you used to be. Honestly, that version of you survived a lot. The version that always stayed strong, always kept emotions under control, always prepared for the worst before it even arrived. But I think part of Scorpio is deeply tired of living that way all the time. The Hermit card appears in this energy with a feeling of very deep inner evolution, the kind most people around you would never fully understand, because these changes didn't happen loudly. They happened internally. The way you see love now, the way you understand pain now, the way you're beginning to realize not every battle needs to continue forever. And strangely enough, the more emotionally mature Scorpio becomes, the less interested you are in proving yourself to the world. You start valuing peace more than attention, authenticity more than loud connections, and feeling at home within yourself more than forcing yourself to belong somewhere, just so you won't feel left behind. The World card appears here so beautifully. It feels like a major cycle in Scorpio's life is slowly coming to a close. Not through some dramatic explosion. More like revisiting a place that once meant everything to you, and suddenly realizing your energy no longer belongs there anymore. And honestly, I think Scorpio has outgrown many things. Old beliefs, old emotional patterns, even certain ways you once viewed yourself. And sometimes that realization feels both heavy and freeing at the same time. Because real healing doesn't always feel happy immediately. Sometimes it feels more like grieving an older version of yourself. Even when you know you can't become that person again. And the Death card returns near the end of this energy, almost like a very deep closing chapter to everything Scorpio has been moving through. Not as something frightening, but as a slow rebirth happening quietly within the soul, like old skin finally beginning to fall away after being held onto for far too long. And honestly, I think Spirit is trying to remind Scorpio of something very important right now. You do not have to rush this process. You do not have to force yourself to become fully healed. You do not need to transform into a perfect version of yourself overnight. You only need to keep returning to yourself, little by little. Refocus. Come back to the things that genuinely bring peace to your soul. Come back to your body, your intuition, your real life outside of the endless loops inside your mind. Because maybe transformation was never truly about becoming a completely different person. Maybe it's simply the moment Scorpio finally stops abandoning yourself.